hundreds of Muslim prisoners being held in Guantanamo Bay, but that also we had in Guantanamo Bay our U.S. Army Muslim chaplain. And that perhaps would be an indication to the world, to the international community, that the United States was treating these prisoners in Guantanamo Bay humanely. I was disturbed by these many things that was going on. I was disturbed how prisoners were being held in cage-like cells, being treated more like animals.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On behalf of the Islamic Research Foundation, we begin this afternoon's formal public talks program. We start with Guantanamo Bay. Arouses curiosity and mystery in the minds of many. Our speaker, Brother James Yusuf E., has been on both sides of this war on terror fence. A unique personality indeed. He was commissioned as the first Muslim chaplain in the United States Army, in fact, one of the first. After the tragic attack on September 11, 2001, he became a frequent government spokesman, helping to educate soldiers about Islam and building understanding throughout the military. Subsequently, Captain E was selected to serve as the Muslim chaplain for the prison camp at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. That would become controversial for its treatment of detainees designated as enemy combatants by the US government, where nearly 700 detainees captured in the war on terror were being held as unlawful combatants. While ministering or talking to these prisoners at Guantanamo Bay, Captain E advised camp commanders on detainee religious practices and objected to the cruel and degrading abuses to which the prisoners were subjected. In September 2003, after serving at Guantanamo for 10 months in a role that gave him unrestricted access to the detainees, and after receiving numerous awards for the services there, Chaplain E was secretly arrested. That too on his way to meet his wife and daughter for a routine 2-week leave. He was locked away in a Navy prison, subjected to much of the same treatment that had been imposed on the Guantanamo detainees, wrongfully accused of spying, espionage, and aiding the alleged Taliban and Al-Qaeda prisoners. He spent 76 excruciating days in a Navy brig, that's a prison, in 2003 in solitary confinement. And he was subjected to sensory deprivation techniques that were being used against Guantanamo prisoners and those declared as enemy combatants. He was also threatened with the death penalty after the US government determined that it had made a great mistake in its original allegations. It vindictively charged him with adultery and computer pornography. But in the end, all criminal charges were dropped and Captain E's record wiped clean. He was reinstated to full duty at Fort Lewis, Washington. But his reputation was tarnished, and what had been a promising military career was left in ruins. He tendered his resignation from the US Army and received an honorable discharge on January 7, 2005. Upon separation, he was awarded with a Second Army Commendation Medal for exceptionally meritorious service. Chaplain Yee's gripping account in his book entitled For God and Country, Faith and Patriotism Under Fire is a remarkable reading. And it poses a fundamental question: if our country cannot be loyal to even the most patriotic Americans, can it remain loyal to itself? The Washington Post called it required reading for all US officials waging war on Islamic terrorists. For this work, he received the Exceptional Communicator Award from New America Media in January 2006. Chaplain James Yusuf Yee is a third-generation Chinese American, and in 1990, he graduated from West Point and then reverted to Islam in April 1991. He served in the US Army for 14 years and has been to the Middle East and Saudi Arabia and other places where he has learned his Islamic academic studies and training. In June 2006, Captain E earned his master's degree in international relations. He now lectures about his harrowing ordeals, Guantanamo Bay, Islam, Asian Americans, and religious diversity issues, and the challenges of protecting both national security and civil liberties. He has appeared on national and global news programs, including the famous O'Reilly Factor, MSNBC's Hardball, Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer, PBS Religion and Ethics, Al Jazeera's From Washington, Democracy Now!, NPR All Things Considered, MSNBC's The Situation with Tucker Carlson, CSPN2 Afterwards, ABC Australia's The 7:30 Report, US Sky World News Tonight, and BBC World Service. Chaplain Yee has briefed congressional staff members of USA, Capitol Hill, and lectured at Harvard, Yale, Oxford, UK, Columbia, Stanford, Duke, Northwestern University, and several other academic institutions of higher learning in the US and the UK. An apt, very experienced speaker to speak on the topic of the day, Guantanamo Bay, abuse of human rights and justice. Brothers and sisters, let's welcome Brother James Yusuf Yee.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. All praise is due to Allah. And may the peace and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon our last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, upon his righteous family, his noble companions, and also upon all of those who follow the path of truth. And God willing, inshallah, that is all of us who are here today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's really my great, distinct pleasure and honor to be here today to talk to you about this issue of Guantanamo and the struggle for justice and human rights that goes on there. I'm inspired always by telling others about my experience, my story, of what it was like for me as a U.S. Army Muslim chaplain to serve in this now notorious prison camp. And I hope that my presentation today is one that inspires all of you to do what you can to stand up for justice and human rights. Let me begin by telling you a little bit more of my background. You heard much of it in the introduction. I'm a third-generation Chinese American, meaning it was my grandparents who came to the United States. Both of my parents were born in America, as well as myself and all of my brothers and sisters, my two older sisters and my two younger brothers. You heard I was a former military officer and chaplain, graduated from the prestigious West Point, the United States Military Academy. But not only am I a graduate of the Military Academy and a former U.S. military member, but the military is actually rooted in my family. My younger brother is also a West Point graduate. And my other younger brother serves today on active duty as an army doctor. My one brother, who is a West Point graduate, as we speak right now, serves with the U.S. military in Iraq. My father also served in the U.S. military. He was drafted during World War II. So the military culture is rooted in my family. And having served in the military, I can say that it's been an experience that I'm proud of with regard to the contributions that myself and other family members have made towards what's known as national security. But not only am I former military, you heard in the introduction that I am a Muslim convert. I converted to Islam in 1991, shortly after I graduated West Point. My journey to Islam in and of itself is an inspiring story, one that I hope to share with all of you in another setting, in another presentation. But yes, I converted to Islam, and being a Muslim is an essential part of my life's experience, because ultimately I would then go and achieve the goal of becoming a Muslim chaplain. I was one of the first chaplains to serve within the ranks of the United States military. And let me tell you a little bit about chaplaincy in the military. What is chaplaincy? The role of the chaplain in the U.S. military is to defend religious freedom, to defend the rights of religious freedom for all those who serve in the military. But not only do we chaplains defend those religious rights of those soldiers serving, but we also defend the religious rights of those civilian employees who may be working on military installations, and also to those prisoners who may be incarcerated or imprisoned by the U.S. military.
And we have indeed made the Quran easy to understand and remember. Then is there any that will receive admonition? Learn the language of the Creator's last testament in Learning Quranic Arabic every Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 5 p.m. Saudi Arabia and 6 p.m. UAE on Peace TV. Islam, the religion of natural instinct.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not forbid anything from a human being unless it's hurting them.
Be the Muslim who lives between al-khawf wal-rajaa. Be the one who lives between fear of the hellfire and lives with the hope of Jannah.
We should do our best to show the most affection and love for our children and for children in general. Do not argue with the people of the book except in ways that are best.
O believers, why are you saying things that you don't do? It is most hated in the sight of Allah that you say something that you don't do.
A believer would know, and a believer would inspire you and encourage you and inform you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives all sins.
Know the only path to salvation. Watch The Spirit of Islam every Monday at 4 p.m. Saudi Arabia and 5 p.m. UAE on Peace TV.
Where truth is hidden, misleading quotations create confusion. Where truth is hidden, lack of knowledge and wisdom cause upheaval and commotion. Where truth is hidden, manipulated scriptures, twisted facts. This very hidden truth creates false propaganda, mayhem, chaos, disorder, and turmoil in our lives and the world order. Is there anyone with courage and wisdom? What is the truth, and who has the courage to expose it? Because it's your right to know the truth.
Watch Truth Prevail and Lies Perish in Truth Exposed by Dr. Zakir Naik. Next on Peace TV.
One of the things that I saw and recognized first and foremost in my assignment to Guantanamo was that role to defend religious freedom. I became a Muslim chaplain in January of 2001 after having converted to Islam, learning a little more in depth about the faith, even studying a little bit of the Arabic language to be able to recite the Holy Quran in its classical form. I then returned to the U.S. Armed Forces as a Muslim chaplain in 2001, January. 2001, the world knows what happened in that year, in September 11, 2001. The tragic attacks on the World Trade Center and on the US Pentagon happened on September 11th. At that particular time, I was a Muslim chaplain serving in the US Armed Forces. It was almost immediately following these attacks that I was approached by senior level leaders, and they would ask me if I would begin training, teaching Islam and the Muslim culture to the soldiers who were serving within the ranks. I would hold lessons, briefings, lectures about Islam, educating those troops. I would begin to receive praise and recognition as someone who was building bridges of understanding, helping these young men and women become better soldiers. I look back on that experience now and speculate that I was asked to do this job because senior level leaders in the military knew following 9/11 that soldiers of the US military were going to be deployed, sent to Muslim nations, Muslim countries like Afghanistan, like Iraq, and like the many other Muslim nations where you find US troops deployed to today. But nevertheless, in carrying out this duty, I educated troops about Islam and the faith that I converted to. That praise and recognition came from the highest levels in the Pentagon, the State Department, and I believe it was that praise and recognition that I received in the immediate post-9/11 aftermath that landed me the assignment in Guantanamo Bay, the prison camp, where hundreds of prisoners have been held in this so-called war on terror. In fact, every prisoner that has been held in Guantanamo has been a Muslim. Every prisoner that has been held by the US military in Guantanamo has been Muslim. And when I was sent there in November of 2002, there were some 660 or so prisoners, all of them Muslim. I look back at that assignment when I was given the orders to go to Guantanamo Bay. I speculated then as well that perhaps I was being sent as a Muslim chaplain to Guantanamo Bay so that my government, so that my nation could say to the world that yes, indeed, there were hundreds of Muslim prisoners being held in Guantanamo Bay, but that also we had in Guantanamo Bay our US Army Muslim chaplain. And that perhaps would be an indication to the world, to the international community, that the United States was treating these prisoners in Guantanamo Bay humanely. The United States was being sensitive to the religion, to the faith of these prisoners, which was Islam, which is Islam. I thought perhaps that was the reason behind me being sent to Guantanamo. Well, when I got down to Guantanamo as the Muslim chaplain, I learned that I did have two roles to play. One role was to be an advisor to the camp commander on how religion affected this military detention operation, how the religious practices of these prisoners, these Muslim prisoners, affected the detention operation. That was my first role as an advisor. The second role that I had was to be a chaplain to all of the Muslims in Guantanamo. Not only the 660 or so Muslim prisoners, but I was also a chaplain to the many American Muslims down in Guantanamo. Yes, there are also American Muslims in Guantanamo, but not as prisoners. There are many American Muslims who work down in Guantanamo, serving mostly as translators. Translators. Imagine, at that time, 660 or so Muslim prisoners being held in Guantanamo. How many languages do you think were spoken in this prison camp? Many languages, from Arabic to Pashto, Farsi, Urdu, Turkish, Chinese, European languages, included German, French, Russian. Who handled the linguistic needs of this military prison operation? Translators, American translators, most of whom were American Muslims. I was a chaplain to the American Muslims. as well as chaplain to the Muslim prisoners. But in my role as a chaplain to the Muslim prisoners, I was given authorized, unescorted access into the prison cell blocks. I was one of the very few individuals who was allowed to speak openly and freely with the Muslim prisoners. And in that dialogue, in that conversation, in that personal interaction with these prisoners in Guantanamo, I learned a lot of what was really going on inside this prison camp. Not only inside the prison cell blocks, but also inside the interrogation rooms. In Guantanamo, there are two operations. There's a detention operation where the prisoners are being held in the cell blocks. Back then, they were being held in what was like caged cells. That part of the operation was ran by guards, military police, who handled the everyday needs of the prisoners, like bringing the prisoners their food, their change of clothes, escorting prisoners to recreation, those types of things. That's one side of the operation. The other side of the operation is the intelligence gathering operation, where interrogators and military intelligence officers interrogate the prisoners to try and extract information from them. Well, I learned of the abuses that was going on in the cell blocks and in the interrogation rooms. Not only from the prisoners directly themselves, but also from many of the American translators who worked in these intelligence and guard operations and had much information about those transgressions. As a U.S. Army chaplain, whose role was to defend religious freedom, I became very disturbed learning how religion in Guantanamo was being used as a weapon. Yes, religion was being used as a weapon in Guantanamo. And because each and every one of the prisoners in Guantanamo is a Muslim, it was the use of Islam, the Muslim faith, weapon against these Muslim prisoners. And I want to share with you a little bit about how that was being done. How these individuals in Guantanamo were being persecuted for their faith, for believing in one God, for believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the ways in which this was being done is something the world learned about in 2005, first from a Newsweek magazine article, which reported that the Holy Quran down in Guantanamo Bay was being desecrated by U.S. personnel. As the Muslim chaplain who was down in Guantanamo Bay in late 2002 and most of 2003, I will confirm that the Holy Quran, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala azza wa jal, was disrespected and desecrated by U.S. personnel. Guards, when they searched the cells of the prisoners, and in any prison operation, of course, there's a need for security operations. But when prisoners searched the cells, they searched the belongings, the items, and when they came to the Holy Quran, they would turn it upside down and violently shake it, thinking that something dangerous might fall out. But instead, it was the bindings of the Mus'haf, of the Quran itself, that were torn, that were cracked, that were ripped, along with many of the pages. And when guards finished searching through the Quran, they recklessly tossed the Quran onto the floor. Because the prisoners were being held in these open-air cell-like cages, they could observe how the guards were conducting the search and how they were disrespecting the words of Allah. And the prisoners became angry. They became furious. And they began to protest. They banged on their steel beds. They banged on their steel doors in protest of how the Holy Quran was being disrespected. Their protests then turned to hunger strikes and even suicide attempts. Some of the Muslim prisoners in Guantanamo tried to hang themselves in their cell in protest of how the Holy Quran was being disrespected. Those more extreme measures of protest occurred when it was learned by prisoners that the Qur'ans were being taken into the interrogation room. And as a Muslim prisoner sat shackled in his chair at the wrist, waist, and ankles, an interrogator would take the Qur'an and slam it in front of him on the floor, stamp on it, kick it, even sit on it. Later, there were investigations that were carried out into abuses towards the Holy Qur'an, conducted by the US military itself. And they revealed that even the Holy Qur'an was at times urinated on by US personnel. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah.